Greetings, everybody, and thank you for joining us on this episode of The Remnant. I have with me a permanent panel member, which is Archbishop Dr. Sterling Lands out of Austin, Texas. And today we're going to focus on, it's a bridge from our podcast on embracing the Black Messiah, which is be linked below. But one of the things that we wanted to talk about, or the main thing that we wanted to talk about, is that in the aftermath of the Montgomery, Alabama free-for-all, we saw something that was vital to our people to know, and especially our young people. Okay, so we saw our people gathering together in unity to defend one of our own, and that spoke volumes in more ways than one. In a lot of ways, it's the shot heard around the world. It is the start of a revolution. And if we are not careful, we will fall by the wayside and succumb to the same old okie doke that we have been given for the last 400 to 500 years. Now, with that said, and with that in mind, Archbishop, what was unique about our people coming together, and how do we convey that message to our people today?
I think that there are a couple of things that we could address here. One is that they saw that the young man, the brother, was being attacked by multiple people. They were on another side of, actually somewhere on the other side of the water, but they were not in his immediate vicinity. Two, they were not concerned about how they would be received or perceived. They saw a brother in distress and they went to his aid. Three, there was a full knowledge because they lived in that area. So they were very well familiar with the way people treated one another, particularly the way Blacks were treated. So it's not as if they were running in ignorance. They were very aware of where they were, and they were very aware of what they had to do. And this brother was in trouble. They went to help him. That's what I saw. And that's the clarion call. And it's been the clarion call, but it's now we have a demonstration of it being answered.
You know, in a lot of ways, this represents what has been going on behind the scenes. You know, yes. even in the social, political, judicial arena of America, is you think you're dealing with one opponent when in reality you're dealing with a gang of opponents. Mm-hmm. And so it is our responsibility to call it what it is in the fight against tyranny.
That's right.
You know, I don't think that he deserved to be attacked like that at all. He's doing his job, and
he was doing his job.
Here's one of the things that these male Karens, for lack of a better term, really have to understand is they have no authority over us. And our people need to start to wake up and say they have no authority over us. So when they fight, we fight back even harder. And I think that's one of the key takeaways that our youth has to have, is that together we can achieve so much. But individually, we're going to get ganged up on. And if we don't call for solidarity quick, if we don't unite, if we don't start teaching our youth, it's not about what we can do individually and personally, it's about what we can do together. We will never get out of the system, the circumstances that we find ourselves currently in this nation and indeed around the world. What do you think about that, sir?
I think you're on target. I would like to say that I believe we need to understand, as the sons of Issachar, the times that we're in. And these times are actually not unlike the 40s, 50s, and 60s, except that we now have technology that we can go to instantly to understand or see what's going on. So people had the mind to turn their cameras on and catch what was happening. That was in the favor of what's the brother's name? Is it Pickett?
I believe so.
Yeah, they had the mind to turn it on to ensure that they caught everything. That's one. Number two, we are in an age where we don't have to go out and try to find out what's happening and then determine what we're going to do or respond. We're in a situation now where you can respond on the spot if you have the right state of mind. That right state of mind is what you just described. We have to be prepared to react to a situation, which means to me that we must be proactive in our preparation. So our people have to be prepared to engage when the engagement is necessary. That's our responsibility to prepare the next generation.
You know, the other day you told us a life event that happened to you, and you were going home after midnight and the sundown rules, the Jim Crow laws that existed at the time,
Yes.
and the Klan that stopped you, they
Yes.
were armed,
Oh, yes.
and thank God that you were able to get away. But
Yes.
this whole thing leads into a conversation that I believe our people need to hear and they need to embrace, which is you said we need to be prepared.
Prepared.
We need to be ready. We also need to be trained.
We need to be trained.
Yes. Now we might have an enemy with superior firepower,
And we do.
but firepower doesn't necessarily win the war.
That's a fact.
Okay, strategy wins the war. Now, over the past several years, especially since the onset of the pandemic, and people were sequestered in their homes and such, you saw a lot of videos on different avenues of social media where our counterparts were training their youth and in firearms, safety and use, as well as survival techniques and such. By the same token, at the same time, a lot of us were posting pictures, and I don't want to say us because they're not really from me, but we were posting pictures and videos and things of children twerking, you know, and you know, our females twerking and such, instead of using that time to instill the message that's going to lead them to victory, we decided to embrace the world, to embrace what has been inflicted upon us because we look at it as entertainment. And instead of entertainment, we need to go through preparation. So, what would be the best avenue? Say a family of four. What would be the best avenue for them to learn how to prepare and to get their house in order? Not just financially, spiritually, but I'm talking about when it comes down to brass taxes, what are they going to have to do?
There are a number of key steps that are required anytime you're in an environment where it's hostile around you and you only have the you inside to depend upon. And of course, we're in an environment that way, no matter where you are in this country or anywhere in the Western world, if you're Black, you're in a hostile environment. Now, that sounds really, really, really far out until you stop and think about it, that there's nowhere where the people's minds have not already been poisoned to see Blacks as being either less than or substandard in some way, even if we end up with 4 or 5 different PhD degrees and all type of experience, because that's the slave master's programming to the slave master's children, which is passed down the line. So after saying that, this is step one. Step one is that our people must get in the habit of investigating. And investigating means that they must get in the habit of researching the who, the what, the when, and even sometimes the why we're operated and we're treated the way we've been treated down through history. It's a bad thing if you get in the middle of a brawl and you have no sense of who you are or what has happened to you before or to your ancestors before. I believe, and I can't prove this because I wasn't there, but just looking at the pictures, the guys who ran to his rescue appear to have an understanding of what has happened to us in the past. And it's impossible, I believe, to live in Montgomery and not have some understanding of what has happened there in the past, including churches being blown up and little girls being killed. So that's the first step. The second step is that we must not only investigate, but then we have to educate. And that educate is that we have to pass everything we know. We have to pass it to our children, our children's children, our neighbors. We need to learn how to collectively ingest and digest the information that we've learned through our investigation. The next step that we take is called to purification. We have to make up our minds that we pledge to stand together no matter what it costs, no matter what is in front of us. We will stand together. That's what that purification is all about. It says that we pledge to do the right thing, the right way, for the right reason, expecting the right results to benefit others, to glorify God according to his word. And we have to stand there without any possibility of being enticed away from that. And it means that we don't sell out. We don't go for the tickets, giving us a ticket to some type of entertainment affair. We don't go for the lunches and the coffees and the dinners so that we can feel like we're important. We don't go for trying to sleep with you because you happen to look like so-and-so. We don't do that. Instead, what we do is say, no, I love the skin I'm in, and I'm here to protect the skin I'm in. That's the purification side. Then the next stage, which is equally as important, is we have to learn how to negotiate. And I'm not talking about negotiating with the oppressor, although that is an area that we perhaps could look at if you read Sun Tzu, but I'm talking now about negotiating within our own circles. We have to learn that we can talk about 25 things, but in that 25, there are 5 that are equally important to all of us. And the other 20, which may be important to any one person, but not to everyone, we shouldn't knock that. What we should do is focus our attention on the 5 that are most critical to us. Those I call the wants and the needs. The wants are the 20, the needs are the 5. The wants are the 20, the needs are the must. So we have to learn to focus on the must, and that's a negotiation that we have to deal with in private among ourselves, even among preachers and teachers, Black teachers. We got to learn how to negotiate among ourselves so that we can arrive at the things that are most important. Then the next thing we have to do is be prepared to go into action. That's really called confrontation. We can't be afraid to go into confrontation. If we're being attacked, to stand back and passively let it happen is insane. If you're in a prayer meeting, that's one thing. But when you're in a bear meeting, there's no time to be in prayer. You got to be in the midst of taking the bear out. So our position then we must learn how to enter in a confrontation, and we must learn the effective ways of doing it. There's some people, not unlike yourself, who are skilled and trained in those areas. We got to pass that on. You got to train folk. No, we're not charging anything. We just want you to know how to come to the aid. You might have to come to my aid. And then, of course, after that, we learn how to come back to the table if the oppressor is prepared to meet our demands. Then we're prepared to come back with some reconciliation, but that meant that there was some repentance. And then, of course, the rest is history. We would, of course, look for future results analysis to see if the person is doing what they say they're going to do, and if they're following up on what they say they're going to do. And then this is important here, we must learn to punish our enemies and reward our friends. Now, let me tell you what I'm saying. We elect people based on their best presentation over the air, be it on electronic media, be it in the newsprint, whatever. We got to stop that. We should only vote for people that have our best interests at heart. It don't matter who they are, no matter what they say. If they don't have our best interests at heart, we don't vote for them. That's punishing the ones who are enemies and rewarding those who are friends. The people who are looked out for our interests, we should get behind them and ensure that they go back in the next time. That's both with our vote and with our money.
Well, you said a mouthful, and I want to go back to 3 points that you made. You know, and one of the points is that one of the key points was that we have to go and learn how to negotiate amongst ourselves.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And I think one of the biggest difficulties that we suffer is that we as a people tend to put the wants before the needs. So if you would, out of the 5 needs, could you specify 2 of those specific needs that we as a people have to achieve?
Well, yeah, the first one would be your health and welfare. I mean, you're no good to me, and I'm no good to you if I'm laying out bleeding to death. So that's probably the number one, and we all have that in common. We all need to ensure that we are protecting each other's back. That's item 1. Number 2, we got to learn how to spend our money within our own community so that we can keep the blood in our bodies, because a body that loses blood dies. Now, that means then that we're going to have to recoup from much of what has happened to us since desegregation. And that's difficult. I don't argue that, but it's something that we must figure a strategy out for doing. So, but the very first thing has to do with your health and your welfare. We got to make certain that there's a protective line, there is a perimeter that you don't let someone just cross into and assume that their assault is just going to go unnoticed. That is not the way that works.
There was another thing that you said that piqued my curiosity.
Yes, sir.
Which is the things that we have done in the past with the non-violent approach to things. Now, are you of the mindset that in this current day and age, we can no longer take that position? Or do you believe that even back then, it was a bad idea for us to take the non-violent route after having dogs sicked on us, fire hoses unleashed on us, lynchings all over the place, burning us, boiling us in hot oil, and see, here's, and thank God I never witnessed any of that. Thank God that many of my immediate family uh, suffered or endured any of that. But those things are real.
Yes, they are.
And I don't think that you can sit passively, me personally. I don't think that you can be passive when someone is trying to kill you. I think you have the opposite of being passive is not aggressive, but it's proactive, which means that you have to do that which is necessary in order to defend your life, your limb, and the ones that are around you that are of your household, of your community. So my main question is this. Do you believe that back in the 50s and the 60s that the nonviolent approach was the proper method to take, or was that just the proper method to take for that time?
That's a very interesting question. It's also a very heavily weighted question because there are many schools of thought there. Let me first confess this, that I was in my first organized march in 1961. 1961. We marched down the highway to a state capitol and to a governor's mansion demanding certain rights. I think I must have been a junior in high school. I was not prepared. I had not gone to any of the nonviolent training sessions. I didn't even know there was a nonviolent training session. I just saw these guys marching down the road with signs saying we shall overcome. And it grabbed hold of me, and I just found myself leaving the campus. I guess I must have cut class, I suspect, but I didn't do that regularly, but I did leave the campus, join that group. We marched down the road, and for about a mile or so, and maybe a mile and a half, we got to the area that they were going to pray in. And on the way there, there were some of the people who were in charge of the march that were coming up and down the line, telling us what to do and what not to do. And they said, you don't talk back. If someone says something to you, just let it go. If they spit on you, you don't do anything back. If they hit you, you don't do anything back. No matter what names they call you, you don't say anything back. Well, I wasn't prepared for that because they didn't, I didn't know that. So now I'm listening to it, trying to take it all in, but I had no idea of what it was that they were going to run into at that point. If you read your history, you'll find out that it was right around that time that things began to really blow up. So we got to the place. There were lines of state troopers on both sides, and they were heavily armed, and they had German Shepherd dogs on at least probably every other officer, or maybe every two officers or so. And so we went down this lane, which was like a gauntlet. And as we went down, we were told to keep our eyes focused ahead and don't look at any of the people who had on these helmets and shields and guns in their hands or sticks or these dogs. So we did do that, and the dogs were just nipping at us, but they didn't let them go. And then we kneeled down to pray. And as we were kneeling down to pray, we heard the dogs, and we heard what sounds like a ruffling. So my instinct was to turn around and see what was going on. But as I prepared to do that, one of the elders grabbed hold of me and just said, "Just be cool, young fella." Matter of fact, he called me young horse. He said, "Look, young horse, just be cool. You're gonna be okay." And we got up and marched back without incident, and that was real. But it taught me a lesson. The next time I was in a demonstration, it was at a counter. We were doing a recording session in a studio downtown. We were very tired and thirsty, so we went down to this little coffee counter to order a coffee and a Coke and maybe something else. And this guy behind the counter said, "We don't serve you ends in here." And so Jay, who's the older of us, said, "Well, we don't eat any ends either. So we just want a Coke from my young friend here, and I want a coffee." So this guy said, well, I'll take my gun out and shoot all of you, so forth and so on. So we said, Jay backed up, Ben backed up, I backed up, and I think Charlie was with us. He backed up. Well, we were backing up toward the door, but the guy fooled around and says, I don't need a gun. I'll whip you. And when he said that, he put the gun under the counter. Well, by the time he put the gun under the counter and raised up, Jay had grabbed him by the collar and had pulled him across the counter. Well, the whole place was packed with other white folks, and we were the only blacks in there. So everybody got into the brawl, you see. So it became really a serious brawl. And in the middle of all of that, one of our guys, our lead singer, came in after us, and he came in the door and saw what was going on, and immediately come to our, to join in because we were outnumbered. As he was doing that, another white guy walked in the door. When he walked in the door, this guy turned around with a Coke bottle and hit him in the head and cut his head open, and he hit the ground, hit the floor at least. So when he hit the floor, we don't have time to be looking, but he looked and saw that the guy's coat flew open and he had a badge, so he was a cop. And so now we're in some serious potential trouble. So we had to fight out. We weren't trying to get out. We were just going to fight as long as we could. But this time, when we saw that badge, we realized we need to get out of there because the next thing in front of us was going to either be killed or jailed. So we ran, and we ran for a long, long time. Our car was parked on the police parking lot, so we couldn't run over to the lot and get it because that would have been obviously a trap. But we ran away and hid for a long time on another side of town and come back in. Now, what's my point? The reality is that the very first time it was a nonviolent movement, and they got what they wanted done and said what they wanted to say, and then we walked away without incident. The second time, we were not in a demonstration. We didn't go there to sit in. It wasn't that. We weren't even thinking about sitting, and we were just thinking about getting what we needed for that particular moment. But the people that were there, they saw us as being agitators, and they thought that we were there to try and make a social issue and make a change, and which was not our objective. So it took me back. By that time now, I'm graduating from high school. I'm getting ready to enter the Southern University, and so we began to address issues from a college standpoint. And lo and behold, there were some people that came up with us. One guy was named Hubert Brown, and you will know him more from his paper, from his famous name, and that is they call him H. Rap Brown, but his name was really Hubert. And we would always say rap because he was a political science major, and he was great at talking. So we'd say rap, and then the newspapers picked that up. Another person that would come through there often was Stokely Carmichael, which we know today was Stokely, which was Call Me to Rape. He came through and made certain deals. So I learned from these guys how we should deal with situations. Now, it's not that Brown was initially a radical, a violent person. He wasn't. He was raised by a very good, solid family who was at the high levels of our society in that area, being Black. But he went with Stokely up to a place north of us, and white folks whipped him until they couldn't see him. And so he came back, he was mad with everybody. He's mad with the world. And that's when you hear the newspapers coming out that everywhere he went, it was burn, baby, burn. Well, some of that stuff he didn't do anyway, but they blamed him for it. What I'm trying to say is that it's situational. There were certain situations that you did go in with the understanding that you could talk about it. And there are other situations where if you hit me, I got to hit you back. Or next thing you're going to think is that you could stomp me, and that's not going to happen. So over time, I learned that if I'm going to be nonviolent with those who are nonviolent to me, and if you're going to be violent with me, I'm going to be violent with you back. That's what I learned. But as I grew older and began to engage with people in the King Center, and I worked very closely with them, I learned and marched with them in Forsyth County, actually, learned that there was more power in our ability to stand and present a case when the odds were all against us and not move. That type of bravery was bigger than the guys who were standing around on the bridges. They all had these 308s and 30-06s. We could see them around us everywhere. But we had the National Guard surrounding us, and we're not sure how many of them would have helped us anyway. But they were marching on either side of us. And as we walked through there, we knew then that there could be death. Well, we had no weapons. Jesse was on the stage. Coretta was on the stage. A couple of others were on the stage. Most of them have passed away by now. They were all up there talking. Those of us who were younger, we were out in the audience supporting what they were saying. It just so happens that the cause, Hosea was there, yeah. The cause was one. We wanted to get the Martin Luther King celebration in that area. We wanted them to shut down certain voter things that they were doing that was hurting our people. They did that. And so we did indeed get a victory for that one time, but it was situational.
Well, so the answer to the question is
you're just not going to let me get by that, are you?
See, here, I mean,
well, I mean, I can answer the question. Personally, I thought it was bad news. I'm not going to be walking down in front of you and you're packing and I'm not, and I'm supposed to be making a plea to you. I mean, that was my position. The answer was no. I'm not going to do that. But I did learn some better ways, and there is more strength, and it takes more courage to negotiate a settlement that is a win-win than it is to go in and just fight until everybody's bleeding and some are dead.
Well, looking back, me personally, I think that approach at that time was for that time.
Yeah, that's right. Situational. I'm with you
right.
there, 100%.
Especially given the type of leadership
yes
that we had in the minimal advancement that had been made since the 1860s, since this is 100 years later. Now we're 50 years plus past that.
Yes.
And I don't think that you can use the same tactic, because we've been using that tactic. We've been marching, we've been protesting, and peaceful protest is one thing. But once the ones that are supposed to protect the protesters become violent, you
got a problem.
Okay. Because we have to remember who they're working for and what their interest in this actually is.
Yes.
And so this leads us to a natural, which is the way our youth unfortunately view law enforcement. They might be there to protect and serve in other neighborhoods, but in our neighborhoods, they're not there to protect and serve. Not for the most part. And that's not to say that there are no good law enforcement officers. It just goes to show you that we have to wake up and recognize the game that has been played on us and that is continuing to be played on us, so that we can collectively make forward momentum. So in the political arena, we're looking at what was done, back 50, 60 years ago, is now abruptly trying to change or revert back to what it was before. And if we are not careful, if we do not unify, if we do not become coherent of the situations, and we stop trying to please, for lack of a better term, massa, and instead look out for our own interests, which massa is already doing. He's looking out for his own interests. When are we going to look out for our own interest?
Well, that's a legitimate question, I believe, and it's one that will go on for a while. But I'll say this to you, and I've thought about this off and on over the years. One is that we are we are used as pawns on a chess table between uh, two groups of people who are the same people. And we're the ones that have moved back and forth to their interest and for their interest. So until we're free from that, it's very difficult to talk about mounting an effective counteraction or leading an action until we're able to get above that. Now, here's where I am. During the 60s and even in the 50s, the people that were trying to negotiate on for the rights for blacks, they had good intentions, except the ones who were eloquent enough to engage in the conversation and learned enough to engage in the conversation really didn't understand those of us who were out in the street area. So we had the guys talking about wanting to go and sit in a restaurant where other people were. Well, that wasn't the case for those of us who were on the street. We didn't care about going to eat at one of those places. What we cared about is don't tell me I can't do it. See, it's one thing to say that we will serve anybody, but you all, that's one thing. But if you say that you will serve anybody but me, then you got a problem. But now, if you say you will serve anybody, I then choose whether I'm going to go into your place or not. Same thing with going into the restaurants and the various hotels and the various other places. Here's what happened to us in 1954. The Brown Topeka, Kansas case was won by Thurgood Marshall and his crew, and so desegregation became the rule. And so when desegregation became the rule, it was an immediate offense inside the Black communities, because before that time, we went to schools where everybody looked like us. The people who trained and taught us looked like us, and they cared about us like we were their own children. So I had the privilege of having some fantastic teachers in my early years in school and all the way through high school and even actually through college, because that was during the time when desegregation was being sold to us as being an answer to what we were asking for. Well, all of us were not asking for that. And when it did happen, the people who lived in our community who were educators, many of them who were in the business of administration, they lost their jobs because there was nowhere for them to go. Their schools were shut down, and they began to shift the kids over to different schools that were basically white, and they were not hiring any administrators from the Black schools. And so the Black administrators basically were put out of business. When the Black administrators began to get put out of business, many of them had to either move or change their lifestyle or something of that nature, or retire. And so our communities begin to implode, because the people that were left there were the people who lived and had been a part of the community, but we weren't the ones that had the money to ensure that the little Black business on the corner could stay healthy. So the Black business began to fail. Then on top of all of that, we get this guy called Jackie Robinson who begins to play ball in the major leagues. Well, when that happened, the other Blacks began to say, I want to go to major leagues too, forgetting that they had a Black league that was the most talented league in the country at the time, but they weren't held up in the media as being, quote, the professionals. Well, that caused our stadiums to shut down. That caused our small businesses to shut down, the kiosks, the mom and pops, all that stuff shut down. So what I'm trying to say is that the people who were negotiating for us thought integration was the answer. Integration was never the answer. Desegregation was never the answer. We were talking about being equal, but we're born equal. Everybody that you and I both know have to breathe the same way, and none of us can hold our breath for an hour. And if we do, that's called a dead person. So we're all equal in that area. Our problem was equity, and nobody brought equity to the table during that period of time. So equity was never addressed. Integration was because we wanted to be equal, because we thought being equal meant they would accept us as as another human being. They did not, and they do not even now. And we have to stop being concerned about that. We got to stop trying to win affirmation from another race. We got to stop trying to win significance from another race. We have to become pleased with the skin we're in. We have to learn how to operate as the people we are. Then, and only then, can we negotiate together about what those top 5 things will be.
It sounds to me like the fabric of our communities post plantation was systematically, forcefully, strategically diminished so that we would be engrafted into a society that never held us in any way, shape, or form as equals to them. Now, how do we convey to our brothers and sisters that we need to establish and support our own communities? We need to establish and support our own businesses, banks, and such. Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
Well, the problem is that we no longer have communities. We have streets that we live on, but we no longer have communities. That was systematically eradicated, or somebody pushed a delete button after the desegregation thing happened, and after the integration of the pros and all that stuff. So we don't have communities where blacks have money that turns around more than one time. We get paid, we come in, we spend the money, but we spend the money with someone who doesn't look like us. So as a result, it's like blood. It comes in, it's in your body, and it bleeds out. So that idea of a community is something we first have to go back and rebuild. And that's going to take a minute to do that, because many of our people have gotten very, very comfortable in moving out to the suburbs where the other people live. They think that that makes them more important. They believe that living out there and driving a car that's twice as much as what they could possibly afford makes them acceptable in the eyes of the people that they moved out to, not realizing that the reason they don't get invited to the cocktail parties with the people they moved out to is because the people don't really want them there anyway. So until we're able to see this, and it's very difficult to do that right now, because we've gone with many of us have been educated in these schools that are predominantly white, and so we have learned from our oppressors how to oppress ourselves. And we do a very good job of oppressing ourselves, and it takes the work away from them and puts it totally in our hands. So until we can reverse that and get that mindset reversed, we're going to constantly be climbing uphill, and the hill is going to be a very slippery slope.
I think this is going to be my last question. But we see all of these things occurring, and we see how some of us, and I don't even want to, because all skin folk ain't necessarily kinfolk, but I see how they look down on their own once they've achieved a certain level, not realizing, or even if they do realize, not remembering where they came from, not remembering what their mommy and daddy had to go through, or their grandparents, or their great-grandparents. And I believe that it's a mockery to the very existence of the people that they, not you personally, but that they call their own, to go back and look down on somebody instead of lifting them up.
Well, that's right. But all they can do is what they've been programmed to do. I used to think a lot about that. And I've seen brothers and sisters who have matriculated through the educational system and have gotten excellent jobs in industry, but they're all working for someone. Very rarely do you find them where they are going to a position where they can hire someone. So most of our people are still in the slave mentality. I got to work for someone. Matter of fact, the elders used to say, go to school so you can get a good job. Well, that's inbred in us. So you
Right.
find if you got 8 of us, at least 6 of us think that way. And in doing so, it's not that they don't believe they're doing any harm, because they don't. But the reality is that their kids will come up in that community not knowing what the history is or what the history was. And they will then try to acquiesce and become a part of a community that never intended for them to be a part of the community. And they will be tolerated, but they will never be assimilated. Therein lies our issue. And so until we stop that, we're going to have this problem. Now, where can it be? Where can we change the motive and change the operation? We could do it in the church. If the black pulpits would change the message, then the black pew would be a different pew. The black pulpit is where the pastor is. The pew is where the people are. The people act the way the pulpit directs them. Unfortunately, our people in the pew who have been programmed by the system are now chasing after the large entertainment centers, which are basically either handled by others who don't look like us, or by those who look like us but who've been programmed to think like someone else.
The old song that was a staple during the civil rights movement, "We Shall Overcome." Uh, I don't know about you, but we await that day with great anticipation. We may never see it, but we have to continue to build our people, to establish our people in the truth of what is against them. You know, we like to talk in the pulpit about Satan when Satan presents himself to our people on a daily basis, and it's not necessarily a guy with horns and a pitchfork. You know, it's these world systems that have been established and placed against them. So, in closing,
sure.
I believe that we must need to understand what has transpired so that we can see clearly of what's lying ahead, because the same snares are being set up, but it's instead of us walking into it like our great grandparents did, okay, you know, and then it eased up gently, you know, little by little. We're walking into this thing and it's going in the opposite direction back to the plantation. So if we're not careful, and if we do not become proactive, I believe that a similar attempt is going to occur, and it might not be enslavement on a plantation, but it'll be enslavement in another way. What say you?
Well, and I'm with you there, but let me just say this so that our viewers will not believe that there's no hope, because there is hope, and it's simple things that can be done. For instance, the young black men must learn how to treasure young black women. We can't treat them like trash, and we can't turn our back on them when a blonde, blue-eyed person walks down the street. We got to treasure black women, and the reason for that is very simple. One is that your mama is black, or should have been, and your dad is probably black. But another reason is that the standard of beauty in the universe is black. It's ebony. it's sepia. So we've been brainwashed to believe that it's something else, and it's not. We've always had it. If you look back in slavery, all of the slaves that were being produced on a plantation were being produced by Black women, but they weren't just there because these people just raped them because they were just there to be raped. No, they were the healthiest women on the planet at that time, and they still are. So these slave masters, these taskers, were in the business of trying to get whatever they could for nothing. They hated the Black man because in the Black man and his seed is the thing that changes the world. The seed of the Black man is the fear of the white man because it represents potential white genetic disintegration. It holds that. There's a possibility that if you just let Black people keep producing, then eventually there won't be enough of whites left because there is a genetic inferiority associated with that gene compared to the Black gene. That's item one. And I'm talking about the seeds of the Black versus seeds of white. Number two, we're being co-opted. They take our men and our women, and now we have to sleep white in order to feel better. Well, when you do that and you do make a baby, now that baby is weaker than the baby you would have made if you slept with a Black woman. So all I'm saying now is that we can start off right now by teaching our kids to honor each other, to love each other, and to see the beauty in the sisters.
You just said a mouthful. All I can say to that is amen. Hallelujah. We're going to lift the offering. The doors of the church are always open. Yes. And that is our time. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us. Archbishop Dr. Sterling Land, the second PhD. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The Remnant.
Amen.
Make sure that you like and subscribe. And please do share this because this information needs to be shared among our people. With that, I will say many blessings to you. Goodbye.